Okay, so today I'm going to do another track walkthrough. So this week when I was coming up with my track for this video, I was getting a bit stuck for inspiration. So I decided to start off using a MIDI loop, this MIDI loop over here. So if those of you haven't used a MIDI loop before, it's basically MIDI data, so notes, velocities that come with no sound. You add the sound later to it. So as I say, I got this from a Cymatics pack, which is free. And this is kind of what it sounds like voiced up. So I voiced it with a piano sound, Easy Rocker preset on the SRX keyboards by Roland. I've got some EQ on it, and obviously, and also this plugin that's adding some noise on it to make it more lo-fi. So this is what the original loop sounds like. So you can hear it goes, the progression goes around twice there, but the only variation's just this, the rhythm changing here. So what I did when I brought it in was, I was mindful not to go adding lots of extra stuff, and I just spent a little bit of time putting some variations in. So as we go along here, adding some extra notes in, switching up the rhythms in places. When I brought some more instruments in further on, making the chords more sustained, adding these little runs in. So the kind of the secret when you're doing this sort of thing is to kind of obviously going for variation. What I tend to do if I do this, my first variations, I'll make one more complicated than the original. So for example, if I want to make it more complicated, you know, I could just make the rhythm faster. Kind of do things like this, just kind of mess around. So maybe make little runs like this. So that's a little bit too fast there. But it's about going and experimenting. If you are going to add extra notes in, a little tip in Ableton to find out what notes you can use is by using this up here. Got this button that says fold. When you hit that, it kind of gets rid of all the notes that are not being used. The reason this is handy is because you can kind of see what notes are being used. You can jot them down if you need to, and then basically, depending on where you are on the tune, these notes should be safe to use. So if the note isn't already used in the song, you don't want to risk kind of putting the wrong note and just stick to these ones. So it's quite handy if you want to go up an octave. Say you want to go above this A, and you want to say, well, where can I go from there? Well, B's in there as well, G. You can C sharp, so you can start adding notes in above it. So if you unfold it, then you know this kind of C sharp here is in the far too fast, that little one there. So basically it just allows us to kind of know what notes we're going to put in, or we can put in. Okay, so that way from there. So once I got the piano in and I set about put some variations in there, I then went to make a bass line, and the way I made a bass line was I kind of came up with, actually I didn't, I used the sound here. Yeah, I've used a preset from Ableton, a hip hop sub bass, and what I did was basically just from the piano roll here, all these bottom notes here, the lowest notes, so these ones here, I've just copy and pasted that MIDI, and I've taken it over and popped it into a new MIDI file, and basically voiced it as sub bass. One thing I have done here though, I made two channels for it. The reason for it being the first note. Sometimes when you're making sub basses, you get notes that are a lot louder when they come through, just the way they resonate, and you can mess around with compressors and automation a lot. But what I like to do in that situation where I keep getting notes that are a lot louder than the rest is I just separate them and turn the volume down. So let's just listen to the bass on its own quickly. on top of the bass amp as well, just to make it cut through in the mix. There's an amp on there as well, so if I just solo and take that amp on and off again, so that's, yeah, so you can hear it's giving it that extra bit grit. Doesn't sound as nice on its own with the amp on, it makes it sound a little more distorted. Without the amp on and the volume turned up a bit. Alright, so next thing I did once I got the bass in was I decided to start adding some extra instruments. So I decided to put some strings in kind of after the first 8 bars. Again, what I've done is taken the same MIDI data, brought it over, but this time because it's just, I'll play the strings on their own that you hear on. I've done that, so so you can hear that cutting in and out there. The reason for that is actually across this whole group there's a compressor sidechain and all this from the kick to give it movement. That's why the strings are kind of ducking in volume there. So yeah, so basically because it's a big section, when I came in to edit it, the main thing I've done is just to kind of pull the notes out to make them sustained. You know, your string section would be sustained for that sort of thing, because I'm going for a kind of padded sound to kind of add texture. So it was just a case of just dragging all that out, just so the strings full attack come up to full volume. And don't keep kind of coming in and out with the rhythm of the piano when it had the same effect. Finally moving along, just kind of another 4 bars later, I've introduced this really simple sound on the operator synth. So it's basically just got two oscillators or sine waves, just slightly different amp envelope, and it's got an arpeggiator on it. Got a random pattern arpeggiator on it. So the MIDI data again is brought down, however this time because on the arpeggiator it was not going to have time to play every note, and I decided to kind of keep the randomness down a little bit by just only ever having kind of 3 or 4 notes tops playing at the same time, just to reduce how big the randomness was, how many notes the arpeggiator to choose from. So that just kind of pulled that down. Okay, so that's kind of the bulk of the tune in terms of harmony and melody. So the next thing I added was the drums. So for the drums, I have over the bus, I have an Ozone 8 vintage tape plugin. So I'll just let you hear. So subtle difference, but you can really hear it on the snare. Bringing the snare off, with it on again. Just helping that snare pop through in the mix a bit, and also some group compression on there using H comp, so it's quite subtle. Okay. For the kick, then, so moving down. For the kick here, I've got a couple of samples laid up. I have this one, which is kind of a low kick sound, the thud, and then just for the bite I've just taken the beginning of this kick here, so it's just more of a top end than you put together. So you've got the thud at the bottom and you've got a kind of click to cut through further up in the mix. Nothing else on this, so the snare. So the snare is 3 sounds together. So we have this kind of clap sound, more traditional snare sound, and then just a bit piece of percussion as well for a bit more high end into the sound. So we put together, we get that. Okay. And on here as well, there's also some EQ just taking off the top end of the snare as well. So that's with it off. So it's with it off, you can kind of definitely hear the 3 different sounds in that high end. It's a bit more obvious. It's layered up, but I just didn't want the high end. It's not really lo-fi. So moving down the hi-hat, it's really simple. It's just a sample in there, sent off to my reverb and delays I've got on my sends. So just Ableton's radio and delay. So have a little. That's the sound. Just a dry. Reverb and delay on it. And then it's panned off, the hi-hat panned off to the left as well. Moving down, got this perk. So this is just kind of just once in the bar. It's just to add just an extra sound, kind of. Yeah, just towards the end of the bar, just an extra percussive sound, just to add a little bit of interest. Oops. Sorry, I just wondered what the automation was there. I must have just clicked on the line and put a marker. There's not actually any automation happening, so I'm just going to delete it now. So finally, the end of the track, I wanted the high end of the drums to change to a ride cymbal. So I started trying to program one. Sometimes it takes quite a while to make a ride cymbal sound realistic, and I wanted the realistic sound, so I just basically grabbed this sample. It was originally a lot faster, so when I've warped it, I've popped on repitch mode. Complex sound is a bit weird. So this is the algorithm how it warps. So if you got a piece of audio that you're moving and you're changing the timing quite drastically on them, and it starts to sound a bit weird, stretched, or I don't know, kind of fizzy, then this is kind of where it popped to. Generally, Ableton defaults on beats. So we'll put that. So you can hear how that sounds pretty horrible, and it's very obvious that it's been processed and the tempo been changed. So got tones there as well. Change the grain size in there as well. But again, very obvious that it's been dealt with in a computer. It's not really supposed to be that speed. So texture though, just quite nice. So yes, I settled on that algorithm. Also, I've got some panning automation there, so it's just kind of moving across the stereo field as it fades out, and also as well an auto filter just to pull it off at the end and just kind of remove the high frequency instead of volume automation. I've also got auto filter automation on the master as well, just at that very last bit there. The reason for it being on the master as well is I wanted this track to be exactly a minute long, so I could put it on Instagram, and exactly a minute long was a little bit beyond the bar, a bit past the bar, so I wanted it to loop again, the whole thing to loop, so I've just got the automation at the beginning and the end, so the track does kind of loop round seamlessly. Obviously if I hadn't put that automation filter on there, it would have been kind of going into like juttering, because it would have been like the first beat of the bar, then going back to the start of the bar again. Okay, and then finally, again being really lazy making this tune, I've used a hi-hat loop. here with lots of reverb again on it, and it's just really heavily filtered, so it's just kind of here at kind of 7k, between 1 and 10k really. That's all I'm letting through there. So there's quite a bit of noise on there as well. Again, I've used a sample for it. I was going to chop it up and put it on there, but sometimes if you hear a sample and it works, just use it. That's what I'm there for. Okay, and then the final thing that I popped in the track was just, I think you might notice if you watched any more of these videos, I've always kind of got some outside noise on here in my tracks, and for this particular one, as you can see, it's called Studio Window Open because I just opened the studio window and pull my phone out. So you've got some of the traffic going past there and the birds singing. Okay, so let's see if I've missed anything. So the sub bass has an amp and a compressor on it, we've talked about that. So on the script here, I've got a glue compressor, a sidechain compressor, and a high pass, low band pass filter. So that's on my strings and stuff. And then on here, all we have is just an EQ on the piano as well. Did I mention? Yeah, as well on Abbey Road stuff. You might hear it, the piano has got movement on it. That's because I'm using the wow and flutter on there as well. So that's kind of putting it in and out of, kind of raising and lowering the pitch a little bit, emulating a turntable that's on its last legs. And finally on the master, I have, as I mentioned before, I have a auto filter introducing the tune and ending it. So we've got that. And finally on the master, I have Ozone 8 doing my mastering for me. So on here we have an equalizer, dynamics. Again, I'm not for this. I've used Mastering Assistant. The reason for it being it's such a cheeky little minute-long tune. Mastering Assistant usually does a really good job of it. So I do my own mastering sometimes, honestly. Okay, so I think that is it for this song. It's just a little one, so I hope you enjoyed it. See you all soon. Bye.